Welcome to Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat, a transformative live stream TV show that brings wellness within everyone's reach. Each episode, featuring expert guests, delves into crucial topics like hormonal health, effective detoxification, and stress management through nervous system optimization. Gain practical insights into nutrition, supplementation, efficient workouts, and biohacking tools to enhance mental and physical health. So now, please welcome the host of Hack Your Health, Dr. Nat.
Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Nathalie Beauchamp. Welcome to the Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat. Today's show, I'm super excited because it is a dear friend of mine. And the purpose of the show really is to bring you interesting guests and topics that are all about health and how they can help you improve your health overall. So it's very practical. We're going to talk about tools and strategies because it's one thing to understand a topic, but what are we going to do to better our life? And it's all about taking action. So the topic for today's conversation is, are you metabolically flexible? Key risk factor and lifestyle modification to improve your health. I think by now everybody has heard the term metabolic or metabolically. So we're going to dig into it, but understanding it is one thing, but also focusing on the issues that not being metabolically flexible can have on us. And as I mentioned, our guest is going to give us really practical tools that we can implement. So our guest is a good friend of mine, as I mentioned, Dr. Stephen Geanopulos. He has been in the health and wellness industry for over 25 years. He specializes in neurology and blood chemistry, and he focuses on really helping people reversing diseases and enhancing their health, all through natural tools and lifestyle changes, as well as chiropractic. He is based out of New York City, and he is recognized for his holistic approach to patients' wellness. He is a speaker, an author, and a thought leader. He has educated thousands of people on navigating health challenges. He serves both as a clinician and as an educator, and he is the CEO of Serene Labs and the co-founder of Reddit, which is one of the first blood chemistry reading services for the chiropractic profession. So welcome to the show, Dr. Stephen.
Thank you so much. That was a great introduction, Dr. Nathalie. I appreciate it.
So you and I go way back, 15 years probably?
Yeah, 15 years.
I would say. So we have a lot in common. We're both passionate about health and wellness. We even had you come to Ottawa for our Health and Wellness Expo. You spoke, and our patients and the community are still talking about that talk. And I remember bringing you to CTV downtown to do a TV segment. So today, Stephen, what we're going to do is really dig deeper into metabolic health. So first of all, let's talk about what is metabolic health and why should people be concerned about?
So that's a great question. And the word metabolic, I think I've looked at a million ways to try to find another word because most people just don't, they don't really have a definition of what it is, but there is no other word. And my definition of metabolism or metabolic health is the way in which your body can take energy in, store energy, produce energy, and adapt to its environment. So that's your metabolic health. I sometimes, say that if I could define in one word what health is, or in one word what youth is, the word would be to be able to adapt. So the ability to adapt, in particular as it relates to energy, taking in energy, storing energy, using energy.
Oh, that's good. So, I think, again, most people might have heard the expression metabolic syndrome. So can you define and dig a little bit deeper on the components of when we know we're not metabolically flexible. I mean, there's sign and symptom of how people feel, but
Mhm.
there are 5 criterias usually to be diagnosed with metabolic syndrome, from a range of one extreme to the other. Correct?
Sure. And that, criteria has been around for quite some time. It's just a matter of when your waist to hip circumference starts to increase, when your cholesterol starts to change, when you see your blood sugar rise. Usually, some years have passed where you could have been living the lifestyle to create this syndrome, but you were just young enough to be able to adapt. And then once you're unable to adapt and then you start meeting the criteria for metabolic syndrome, well, a decade could have passed. And the question is then, what are some even earlier signs that you could look at? And that's really what I'm interested in. I'm interested in saying, how can we show people a way out of this before, it's kind of like people want to know when they're pre-diabetic so they don't find themselves so unlucky to get diabetes,
Mhm.
as if pre-diabetes is a pre-disease, as if it were not a disease. If you're just not careful, you might one day get diabetes, when we know that pre-diabetes is a disease in and of itself. It has its own characteristics as a disease, and not getting type 2 diabetes is not exactly an accomplishment. Not being pre-diabetic is a far better criteria. And we don't have, for example, we don't say anything until we hit that 5.7 on the A1C to say we're officially pre-diabetic. But I like to say that 5.3 to 5.6 is insulin resistance, right? It is a disease state. And then therefore, if you find yourself outside of the range of 4.8 to 5.2, you should be concerned, simply because you know where it's going.
Yeah. So we're talking about signs like hypertension, right?
Mm-hmm.
Insulin resistance, as you mentioned, prediabetes, dyslipidemia, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and abdominal obesity as well, like carrying too much weight around the midline. So those are
Mm-hmm.
kind of the standards. And like you said, they've been around for quite some time, the 5 tail sign of metabolic syndrome. But
Mm-hmm.
as you mentioned, there's a lot happening before we get to that point. So why is it so important, Stephen, to control this? Obviously, no one wants to have a disorder or a syndrome, but I
Mm-hmm.
think what we need to mention is that you know all the chronic diseases like diabetes, like cancer, like Alzheimer, like dementia are oftentimes metabolic disorder. Alzheimer has been called type 3 diabetes for
Yep.
that reason. So it's not just to have the right cholesterol number or the right blood pressure. It has consequences because most of our chronic diseases are inflammatory disease and have a huge component of metabolic issues, right?
For sure. For sure. Yeah. I mean, uh, when it comes to the brain, that is, uh, 2% of your body weight. It uses up to 30% of your resources as far as fuel goes, showing how important it is. Our education really talks about how the centrality of the central nervous system, and how that is our primary concern. So when the brain is being is put into a toxic soup, so to speak, because of the environment that you put it in, well, that is going to result in your demise. And then you got to say to yourself, well, what are some signs of brain dysfunction decades before early cognitive decline shows up? And I actually believe, and I think there's enough research now to show this, that digestive symptoms and concerns are your first signs of central nervous system dysfunction at the level of the brain. And ultimately, that has to be addressed, because again, we always say you only use 10% of your brain at any given time, right? And that's complete nonsense. Yes, maybe cognition is only 10% of your brain power, but that's because 90% of it is going to power your body. In particular, the largest neural network outside of your brain is in your gut. And that nerve that we call the vagus nerve, it's the largest nerve complex in the body, is concerned with doing two things: delivering oxygen and fuel. And we get our oxygen, of course, from our lung capacity and our cardiovascular delivery system, but we get our fuel from our diet. And you have to, so much of your brain's energy is going to digesting food. If you have symptoms, gas, bloating, loose stool, constipation, if you have a well-balanced, healthy diet, yet on your blood work we can see nutrient deficiencies, you got to ask yourself, it's not the idea you are what you eat. The idea is you are what you eat, digest, and absorb. And if you're not digesting and absorbing efficiently, that's a brain problem. That's a brain problem in both directions. It's a brain control problem of the digestive system, and it's a brain energy fuel problem, because now that you're not digesting well, you cannot deliver to your brain the fuel that it needs, and you put the central nervous system in a state of stress early on in life. So I really believe that waiting for early cognitive decline, once that process has started, there's not much that's going to stop it. And I'll never discourage the spending of money on looking for cures for Alzheimer's, but we all know the idea is to not get it, right? To not get dementia. Because once that train is rolling, there's virtually no stopping it. I mean, if you look at the last 25 years, how many medications have been approved for the use for use on dementia or Alzheimer's? And the answer is, I think, 2 in the last 25 years. I think the third one came out this year, and they're clearly not effective. Matter of fact, this third one that was approved in the United States, there's a lot of controversy behind the people who voted for it because they have conflict of interest. So there's nothing on the horizon. So the idea is to understand brain function from very early on in life, so you can avoid this inevitable outcome for so many people.
And just today, actually, I was having a discussion with a patient reviewing, her scans and things like that, her nervous system scan, and she had headaches and migraine and brain fog, and young lady, like late 20s, and she's like, "Oh yeah, so brain fog is not normal." I'm like, "No," and migraine is basically that, right? Your brain on fire, unfortunately. So I think a lot of people are walking around with brain fog, lack of energy, with digestive issue. And like you said, it's not just about, it's unpleasant that I have gas or, I have digestive issues. No, it's crucial, because those are symptoms that your body is not working properly. And I know we have the same philosophy, that we're both what we call doctor of cause, meaning that we want to find the cause of why the body is not working optimally. So talk to us a little bit more about the tools and the test for people to, know a little bit more where they're at when it comes to their metabolism. And maybe we even start with the fact that, what does it mean to be metabolically flexible and use energy at different time of the day and so forth? Why don't we start with that before we dig into the test?
Yes, of course. Energy is something, and again, always think as to who we are and where we came from. So prior to the modern age where we have technology. So for example, without gigantic diesel engines, you cannot ship produce from around the world so that people who live in Ottawa can have fresh tropical fruits and vegetables available to them 12 months out of the year, right? So it's safe to say that prior to modern technology, humans have been around for quite some time, and they thrived in many different environments without, 12 months a year of access to anything we've ever called food on the face of this earth. So we have to be able to have sustained energy in order to do all of our activities of daily living, and For some people, the activities of daily living are hunting and gathering and building shelter and all of those things. And that energy comes from the food we eat and the energy that we store from the food we eat, because sometimes we have abundance and sometimes we have lack. And whether we're in a state of abundance or a state of lack, lack being fasting, we have to still get our work done. We can't walk around lethargic and expect to survive as a species. So we have a system to do that, where we can eat food and have energy, we can be fasting and have energy, and everything in between. So a lot of times, because we live in such a great abundance here in Canada and the United States, the abundance we have, like I said, anything that has ever been called food on planet Earth is available to you at arm's distance in any supermarket you want to go to, 24 hours a day, anytime, and it's dirt cheap. And think about it, it is dirt cheap compared to all of human history. So we find ourselves in a situation where we fool ourselves and we think, oh my goodness, you have to wake up and have breakfast immediately, and then a snack, and then lunch, and then a snack, and then dinner, and then a snack, because if you don't have sustained energy, you'll be lethargic and you'll collapse and have hypoglycemia. This is complete nonsense. We know this to be untrue. And we have a whole array of hormones that our body uses in order to adapt to the abundance and in order to adapt to the lack. And we should probably be able to go from abundance to lack efficiently and easily. And we call metabolic flexibility the ability to produce the energy you need to do everything in your life in either of those two states.
Oh yeah, and I know that you're a big fan of intermittent fasting, and I'm sure we'll dig into that later when it comes to. So again, I was listening to a podcast today, and the host was saying that being metabolically flexible is able to skip a meal without having to kill everyone around you because you're crashing, right? So it's to have the energy and to be able to switch from the different system in your body to leverage that. So again, it is so true that we have access to just about everything. And back in the days, I know that I competed in natural bodybuilding, and I remember my diet being 6 meals, and just like I just kept eating, and things have come a long way in terms of us understanding how our body uses energy, and also too having constant stress on the body to be digesting is not good, right? And that's why fasting has its benefit, that we're giving our body a break from processing food. We're allowing the body to repair. We're allowing the senescent cell to get cleared out. So it's very important. So Stephen, when you were,
I'm sorry. Let's kind of just define that a little bit for the audience, because I think that's a really great point that you bring up. So the digestive system is a very active system, and we always look at your body as being 100 trillion cells, right? And those cells, so for example, you don't keep your cells. I'm 54 years old. My skin cells have not been around for 54 years. I probably went through 400 pounds of skin in the shower in my lifetime. When you have a bowel movement, 40% of your stool are dead cells. Your digestive system replaces itself like within 3 weeks. It's completely brand new as far as its cellular structure goes. So you're correct. The digestive process results in the sloughing off of cells that are old. And if we are eating 16 hours a day and fasting 8 hours a day, well, then there's an imbalance of how much damage is being done to the road. So think about a very busy, well-trafficked highway with a lot of trucks and snow and ice. It's going to develop potholes. Sometimes you have to stop the traffic, repave the road before you can let the traffic back on. And that balance is something I think we've kind of lost. The question is, what is intermittent fasting? There are people who think Ramadan, which is 13 hours, which I think is pretty natural. It's not intermittent fasting. It's not even fasting. It's just a normal day, right? It's what it should be. Before there was electricity and refrigerators and sunlight, nobody was eating, 12, 13 hours a day, right? In the time of, John Adams here in the United States in 1776, he didn't have a refrigerator and a pantry full of food when he woke up in the morning, right? He had to go tend his farm, do some work. Then he would have his meal and probably go to his law firm and then have to come back and work the farm again. And then when the sun goes down, there's no light other than candlelight, so you might as well just go to sleep. So I would imagine that what we call intermittent fasting is not that, right? Time restricted eating. Asking somebody to go 13 hours is not like a Herculean effort, and nobody should even imagine to think that that's even called intermittent fasting. And there are women running around saying, oh, but my hormones, what are going to happen to my hormones if I don't eat for 14 hours? Nothing's going to happen to your hormones if you don't eat for 14 hours. If something does happen to your hormones, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen, it does, but that's evidence of metabolic inflexibility, something you have to work on to correct.
Yeah. And that's something, we might as well talk a little bit more about intermittent fasting then, that, it's for people when they start, it can be a bit scary, right? Like for people that are constantly eating, and the goal is to kind of to push your breakfast as much, your time as much as possible, and making sure that whenever you break your fast to have a good protein and a good fat, so you're not just eating carbohydrate. I know you and I are both on the same page with eating protein in quantity of your lean body mass, and especially as we age, because longevity is in direct correlation with muscle mass. So the last thing that we want to age properly is decrease our muscle mass. So I know when I mention to people to do this, they kind of, oh, what do you mean? So start slowly, push your breakfast. And yes, for people that have a little bit of hypoglycemia, it's going to be a little bit challenging and you need to go at it slowly, but you're doing it for that purpose, to stabilize your blood sugar. So it's kind of that balance that you need to achieve. And I know you're a huge proponent of ketone to help start people with that. And I know your company does manufacture it. So can you talk a little bit more about your tips for people that maybe want to try intermittent fasting or time restricted eating, but are scared and are probably not metabolically flexible yet? How should they start?
Yeah, so we created a product some time ago based on the idea that exogenous ketones are a good way to kind of bridge the gap between when, the state that you're in. So most people who haven't fasted, the physiology required. So for example, when you fast, what we want is for there to be a immediate mobilization of your fat stores to break down the fatty acids into a fuel that we call ketones. Ketones, and this is where the term ketogenic diet or being in ketosis comes from. And some people are just so inefficient that if they go a certain period of time and not eat, their blood sugar drops, their ketones don't go up, and they find themselves in a state of crisis because they don't have fuel, and they'll be what's called hangry. And they have mood changes and all of the things that are negative, that are negatively associated with low blood sugar. So what you can do as you're trying to widen the gap in which you are trying to fast is you can use a supplement, a ketone supplement, that'll kind of put that into your bloodstream and give your cells a taste of what they once knew, right? Because when you were born, you were in ketosis and you stayed in ketosis during breastfeeding and all of that. And the body knows exactly what to do. It just needs the opportunity to do it. And this can bridge the gap. I don't believe that you should take supplements, like exogenous ketones forever, but I think it's a great way to bridge the gap between where you're being metabolically inflexible and developing flexibility. I think it can take for most people anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks, depending on your pre-existing state. And so let's just say you wake up in the morning, it's 7 o'clock. Usually you have breakfast, you're going to hold off until 11 o'clock. And then it's, 9 o'clock hits, you're getting a little hangry. You could have this drink of exogenous ketones that can give you, first of all, it can curb your appetite. It can make those cravings go away. It can flood your bloodstream with some supplemental ketones that would provide your brain and your body with some fuel to help you get to that 11 o'clock mark or 12 o'clock, whatever your desired time is. What you'll find is that if you do this properly, it doesn't take long to be able to go from 13 hours to 16 hours of fasting, probably 7 to 10 days for people who do want to do it slowly. So supplemental ketones can be helpful with that, and you can talk to a healthcare provider, or even you could probably purchase it pretty much anywhere now. And do that. Just be careful of some of the ingredients that are in these products.
Yeah, because there's ketone salt, ketone esters.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I myself use ketone ester and ketone salt for a different purpose.
Yep.
Ketone salt before a workout if I'm feeling a little bit sluggish. Ketone ester for the afternoon if I want to, be on
Mm-hmm.
Concentrating properly and productive and so forth. So it's nice to have those tools, but a lot can be done with the diet, and the goal is to not need those because you've developed that flexibility. So let's dig a little bit deeper into the tests. So if people think, well, symptoms and tests, people are listening to us to say, wow, I don't know if I'm metabolically flexible. So what are the signs, the symptoms, and how can people find out?
So when it comes to metabolic inflexibility, I think we should expand the definition to include how your body not only can convert body fat into energy and fuel through developing ketones or producing ketones. But in order to do that, you need a kind of a healthy liver. You need a good hormonal system. You need to know, but your body has to have good hormone sensitivity. We've heard a lot of terms like insulin resistance. So insulin is a hormone, and if we're resistant or sensitive, that's meaningful, right? So if insulin is a hormone that takes, for lack of a better explanation, sugar out of the blood, the less hormone you need to pull the more sugar out of the blood, the more sensitive you are. And then the reverse is true when you're resistant. You don't want to be resistant. That means if it took this much insulin to metabolize an apple when you were 13 years old, and now you need this much insulin for the same apple, well, then that's a problem. That's a sign of insulin resistance. Now, insulin is important because it's one of those hormones that when there's abundance, you use it to store the energy you just ate. And then the opposite of that, when you're fasting, are hormones like cortisol, and they do the opposite. They take your stored energy and put it into your bloodstream for you to use. So it manufactures sugar. Well, you can have resistance problems there too. And if you're not sleeping well, you can overproduce cortisol so that you're dumping more sugar into your system throughout the day, and you never have an opportunity to get into ketosis. So I would say the number one way to prevent metabolic inflexibility, even if you're doing intermittent fasting and you have all the diet strategies correct, is poor sleep. And poor sleep would include sleep apnea. It would include, drinking alcohol. It'd be whatever would disrupt the sleeping process, overexposure to blue light, etc. Another cause of elevated cortisol, in addition to poor sleep, is exercise routines that can actually result in the overproduction of cortisol, these high intensity types of workouts that are super important, but tend to be done out of balance, especially in people our age. So I would say that signs and symptoms of you being metabolically inflexible, I mean, you can get something as simple as a ketone meter, where you can do a little pinprick stick of blood. You drop some blood onto this meter. It tells you what your ketone level is. And I've been in situations where I've had poor sleep and my ketone production is nearly nothing, and I've been on a carnivore diet and fasting for hours. So I will tell you that poor sleep is one of the best ways to prevent metabolic flexibility.
Oh, so we're going to take a minute to go to a quick break here, and we'll continue with, I think we need to talk a little bit more about cortisol and the impact of stress on hormone because it's all connected. So we'll be right back.
In today's world, the flood of health information feels endless. But amidst the noise, two experts with over 50 years of combined clinical experience come together to help you with Smart Cuts, biohack your health span, cutting-edge protocols for greater energy and performance. Dr. Paul Sly, a beacon for athletes, weekend warriors, and those seeking to elevate their potential. And Dr. Nathalie Beauchamp, renowned for empowering individuals in their health journeys. Together, they've produced the book, Smart Cuts, Biohack Your Health Span, a protocol-based treasure trove packed with actionable steps. Journey through 5 transformative sections. Dive into sleep, hydration, movement, brain health, and even the secrets of longevity. Guided by their expert hands, unleash the best version of yourself. With over half a century of clinical wisdom and innovative protocols, reclaim your health and redefine your limits. Are you ready to embark on this transformative journey? Smart Cuts, available now.
And welcome back to Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat and my guest, Dr. Stephen Geanopulos. We are talking about metabolic health. So, Stephen, let's continue with sleep because, I mean, we have an entire chapter in our book, Smart Cut, on sleep, and it is the first section. And every presentation that I do, and I'm sure you're the same, I talk about sleep because it is such a fundamental tool. And I know, people that are into biohacking, it may sound boring. It's not like, fancy, but sleep is your number one thing. Honestly, you have to make that a priority. And I think when it comes to hormone, a lot of women, when they're in their 40s, will wake up in the middle of the night because of the rise in cortisol, as you mentioned, but it's also oftentimes sugar dysregulation, right? And a lot of women are not really having hot flashes per se, but blood sugar is dysregulated. And I know with patients, I often suggest to them, make sure you have a protein and a good fat before you go to bed to stabilize all this, because it is, as you said, all connected with the hormonal system.
Yeah. So when it comes to cortisol, what I always like to say, we think of cortisol as a stress hormone, right? And it certainly is. If you're sitting around doing nothing and then you walk around the corner and a lion jumps out at you and you need the energy to run or fight, you have to have the hormone dump into your system to create the fuel that you need to run. So cortisol is a stress hormone for sure, but it's also a blood sugar regulating hormone. And it's also a sleep hormone. So what happens is when we go to bed at night, cortisol is the lowest in the day. And then during the night, while you're fasting and there's a very active brain process going on, you start to increase your production of cortisol during the night, as you should, in order to give your brain the fuel that it needs. Now, people who are dysregulated find themselves waking up in the middle of the night. And sometimes they're waking up in the middle of the night with their heart rate racing and they're sweating. And the reason for that is if you are unable to produce the cortisol during the night, your brain says, hey, I need fuel, and it will hit the adrenal glands, right? The adrenal glands are like a super stress hormone that will give you the shot of sugar that you need, that your brain is asking for, but it's also going to cause your heart rate to go up and it's going to wake you up. So now we have this sleep dysregulation. Now, when you wake up in the morning, your cortisol is highest for a reason, because all of your ancestors never had a refrigerator and a pantry full of food. So when you wake up, you need enough sugar in your blood to get your day started, to begin to hunt and gather and take care of your business for the day. And then when you go out hunt and gather, maybe you'll break your fast later in the day or later in the morning or later in the afternoon. But it's cortisol that does that. And if your sleep is poor, we find that because what's supposed to happen after you wake up is your cortisol is supposed to drop. and it doesn't in people with poor sleep. So what happens is your cortisol will stay up. Let's just say it stays up 25% higher than it normally would. Now you're producing sugar throughout the day in your bloodstream, which means you need more insulin to deal with the breakfast cereal that you just ate. And you can see how this can quickly get dysregulated, where cortisol and insulin are doing this dance trying to manage your blood sugar, and it's just not working for people with the standard American or the standard Canadian lifestyle.
Yeah. So true. So let's say, what do you suggest to patients to do when it comes to blood panel? If they, I think we should all get our blood work done regularly, because if we change our lifestyle and our diet within 3 months of blood work, right, you can see a huge difference. So I'm very much about measuring, because, and also too, knowing your numbers is important because you can manage them better. And also talking about lab ranges, that functional ranges versus traditional ranges in numbers. I think we should address that a little bit, because I think it's important.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm a fan of looking and measuring things that don't change very quickly. So, we all know vitamin D is good for you, but you can change that pretty quickly with some nutritional supplements. That's not a measure of your health. It's what you do over long stretches of time that will dictate where you're going. When you do blood work, it gives you a baseline. And if you read getting your blood work done and read to you is very different than getting your blood work interpreted. So the value is not in the report, in the numbers. The value is in the interpretation of the report. So if we were to just say, all right, there's what was measured on the left, there's your result to the right of that, and then there's the reference range. And the reference range is, people think it's a normal and abnormal, healthy and unhealthy, sick and not sick kind of a range. That's exactly not what it is. The reference range is based on the experience of the laboratory that you went to, comparing you to other people who went to that laboratory that month, which means these numbers shift and change according to the community that you're in. It should be called a community rating, right? It should be, that's really what it is. But then the problem with that is, well, who's more likely to get their blood checked, sick people or healthy people? And we know the answer is sick people. So comparing yourself to the sickest among us is not a great idea. But then you say, well, why do they do it this way? That's because there's smart reasons to do it. These are the unintended consequences. And there are some markers like hemoglobin A1C or LDL cholesterol that are standardized across the country. But for the most part, these ranges can fluctuate. In one laboratory, you could be technically hypothyroid. In another laboratory, you're not. And that's a problem. So what we do is we ask those same biochemists who come up with these numbers and say, what are the numbers for the healthiest among us? They, as you would imagine, would give us a much tighter range. And that's what we would call the optimal range. We find that if we are outside of the optimal range, but within the reference range, it could be meaningful. Usually, when you take these markers in groups, as opposed to just looking at them like, what's my LDL? When you take them in groups and you see a certain system in the body veering off or going in a direction that is unfavorable, well, then you can turn that around through diet, lifestyle, and nutrition. But waiting for all of these things to go outside of the reference range and become a pathology, become a disease, well, now you have a bigger challenge. A lot of chronic diseases can be reversed, but it's better to not get them. Reversing them requires more effort on your part. But that's where blood work is very valuable in establishing your current baseline of where you are, and then the interpreter should be able to explain what's the best way to reverse the trends that we're seeing if they need to be reversed. That's one of the 5 things I like to do to assess, because certain markers like hemoglobin A1C can't be fooled. You can't, it's not like you'll spike it if you eat a chocolate cake the day before your blood test. It's a 90-day running average, so that's helpful. And there's other things you can look at that tell us about time in your blood work. The other assessments I like to do are also things that can't be fooled. Something as simple as muscle strength. You can't like say, oh, I got a doctor's appointment, he's going to check my muscle strength and I better work out today because I got my appointment tomorrow. That's not going to do it. So your strength is more indicative of who you've been for quite some time. And if I could just, if you don't mind, Natalie, I'd love to just talk about this for a second, because all you have to do is go onto Google and type in grip strength and longevity, or grip strength and heart disease. And here's a shocker that I think people are going to hear me say this and say, he's got to be crazy. So a bigger predictor of a future cardiac event, more than blood pressure, is your grip strength. So being in the higher percentile for your age group is more indicative of you not having a cardiac event than your blood pressure. Now, we know how powerful blood pressure is in predicting a cardiac event. Grip strength is more powerful, and this goes back 40 years. Research has been done repeatedly. And of course, grip strength is associated with longevity for other reasons, right? If an elderly person trips and holds onto a railing, you need grip strength to not let go of the railing and hit the ground. That's obvious, but you can't fool grip strength. If it declines over time and you do the test, and you can just go on Amazon and get a hand, $30, you can get your own grip strength measurer. So that's a measurement. Now, there's other ways to measure strength. We can talk about that, but that's something that's very simple. Then there's joint flexibility, muscle flexibility, range of motion, the ability. That is a sign of longevity, right? How much flexion can your knee, your spine, how much rotation do you have in your body? What is the range of hip replacements, knee replacements, shoulder replacements are pandemic in our culture. That's indicative of poor metabolic health. And I can take that right to the blood sugar story, right? Because sugar in your blood means you're insulin resistant, which means the insulin won't open the door to let the sugar into the cell. When that sugar goes through your capillaries around your joints, the sugar leaks out of the capillaries into the joint space. The cells in the ligaments and the tendons and the joint capsule cannot take in the sugar. The sugar just hangs out outside of the blood vessel, outside of the cell, in that watery space. And what does sugar do? Like salt, it pulls water with it. So now you have a stiffer joint because there's sugar pulling water into that space. And what does sugar do? A1C is a measure of how sugar sticks to protein. Well, it doesn't just stick to the A1C position on hemoglobin, it sticks to all of your proteins. So if you have sugar sticking to your proteins in your extracellular space in your joints, while it's pulling water with it, and then the immune system recognizes that cell as being defective, the immune system comes to try to repair it, it's going to lay down some patchwork that's going to include calcium, and now you have bone spurs and all of the things we see on X-ray that are just it's happening to people at a younger and younger ages. So this is going to prevent your joints from having the flexibility that they once had. And this is associated with it. So we have joint mobility. And so a lot of times we do what's called a functional movement screen to see what people can do, how deep of a squat can they go into, how can they rotate their torso, what's their shoulder range of motion, hip, knee range of motion like. So we have something as simple as grip strength, which tells me about the last 10 years of your life. Something as simple as joint flexibility and range of motion, which tells me about the last 10 years of your life and your metabolic health. We have your blood work. And then in addition to that, there's body composition, which is easy to do, right? There are devices out there like DEXA or even the InBody. Things don't have to be 100% accurate, right? As long as we're directionally correct, it's powerful. I like the InBody because it gives you a measure of your lean muscle mass, your subcutaneous fat, which is quite frankly not unhealthy, and your visceral fat, which is grossly unhealthy. So getting that body composition checked and seeing what your visceral fat is, again, you can't fool that. You can fix it pretty quickly. Again, it doesn't take years, but it has to be fixed. So now we have body composition, we have muscle strength, we have joint and muscle flexibility. Then I would say VO2 max and resting metabolic rate is something, again, that can be calculated on like there are these calculators where you can guess. Yeah. There are some tests that you can do to guesstimate your VO2 max, or you can go get a VO2 max test done. These are becoming more and more abundant all over the place. There are portable devices that are awesome. And there's actually nothing that's a bigger predictor for longevity than VO2 max. And as a matter of fact, your VO2 max when you're in your 80s or 90s in need of nursing care, you can predict that. You could say that if your VO2 max drops below 20 at a certain age, you're going to need help. You're not going to be able to navigate your world. And if your VO2 max is something that declines at a percentage every year, and you know where you're at 50, well, then you say, okay, if I'm genetically gifted enough to live to 100, and I want my VO2 max in my 90s to be 25, and I'm 55, and my VO2 max is at 35, well, I'm going to decline very quickly. So what can I do to improve it and have the decline happen less precipitously? So looking at your VO2 max is a powerful tool. You can't fake that. It takes a long time for your VO2 max to decline and to improve and stay there. And then finally is your blood work, right? Your blood work establishes your baseline. Those 5 measurements are so tried and true. According to the research, they're so indicative of who you've been for a long time. They can't be fooled. I don't want to hear about your telomere length and your vitamin D levels, which are, again, these are important things. But if you want to know where you're at right now, those 5 things are tried and true in the research. They go back decades. VO2 max is a 100-year-old technology. We have so much data. Why waste your time on anything else? When you can start there. And then the other stuff is important too, like doing certain genetic testing and all that. But that's not going to predict what your life is going to be like in what they call the marginal decades.
Yeah. Well, 2 good points that I want to pull out of this is that, like you said, sadly, with our healthcare system, I'm sure probably in the US as well, when people get their labs done, nothing said, yeah, your numbers are good, or, and then even people looking, well, this is high, this is low. What does it mean? Oh, it's okay. Well, what do you mean it's okay? It's not okay. So you're so right that having your blood work interpreted by someone who's qualified to see those patterns, to see those tail sign of potentially where you're going. So I think this is crucial. And on another note too, with the 5 things that you mentioned, we don't get that done for our yearly checkup. So, blood chemistry, sure, basically done, but probably not interpreted properly and probably done within the sick people range. VO2 max, body composition, muscle strength, and grip strength, which would be it's an easy test. I have a gripometer right beside me here that I can test. And then functional movement and flexibility. So is the sit-stand test, right? Like, how can you start from a sitting position and raise? Again, very, very big tail sign of your aging. So those things should be incorporated, right, in our evaluation to see how we are when it comes to health.
I can't even imagine what else you would do. Just from a cardiac standpoint, right? The number 1 killer in North America is cardiovascular disease. And, a stress test is essentially almost useless. It has a 50% specificity and accuracy for picking up heart disease. Complete waste of time. Now, a nuclear stress test obviously brings it up to 90% accuracy and specificity, but that's very expensive. It's very expensive, and it gives you radiation, cancer-causing radiation. Like, what would you need that for? But a good quality VO2 max and resting metabolic rate test given to proper analysis is as specific and accurate as nuclear stress testing, and you can go to a place to have it done for a couple of $100, and it's worth doing. And then there's all the longevity benefits that you get from understanding your current position, your VO2 max. You and I are big fans of Peter Attia, being a wonderful author and thought leader in this space. And there are things that he says that you and I probably disagree a whole lot with, but there's a whole lot that we agree with, and there's no questioning how intelligent he is. And one of the best things I've heard him say ever is decide what you want to be able to do in the last decade of your life and reverse engineer it. So if you want to, at 90 years old, or let's just say at 100 years old, be able to climb 3 flights of stairs, carry 10 pounds of groceries, get up off the floor, pick up a grandchild off the floor. If these are things you want to do in addition to having cognitive stability, well, then where do you have to be at 80? And then where do you have to be at 60? And that's like tomorrow for us. So, reverse engineer where you'd like to be. Now, nobody has a magic, way of finding out how long they're going to live, but let's just pretend and say, if I were to live to 100, here's how I'm going to prepare for that, because I would rather be self-sufficient and enjoy my life in those last years.
So I think Dr. Attia calls it the decathlon for centenary, right? Like, if you're able to do the Olympic when you're 100 years old. I think, Stephen, what are your thoughts on, it can be overwhelming for people, right? Like, what we're talking about is pretty simple when you think about it. But I think we all need guidance. We all need coaches. So I'm a big fan, all through my career, I've had coaches, that it comes to, personal growth or performance and so forth. And I think we have to start looking at our wellness team as having those kind of people that can provide those services for us. Because let's say somebody does their VO2 max and does their DEXA scan and body composition is not good. What then, right? But I think people are still, I don't know, they're shy to go and ask, or don't know where to go and ask for help. And yet there are a lot of providers that can help. What are your thoughts on that?
So, no, it's very good. So it's that, let's just say you get the 5 measurements, right? I have a lot of patients who are former athletes, either former amateur athletes, former professional athletes, and now they're closer to my age. And when I tell them they need a coach, they kind of say, no, I've been working out and eating right my whole life. What do I need a coach for? I'm like, you spent your whole life with a coach. Like you were coached from the time you were 5 years old. And now all of a sudden you don't need a coach for the things that are the most important thing to you. And a part of a coach's responsibility is to hold people accountable. That's what you want them for, but also to help you with your plan. So if your grip strength is whatever it is, you can say, all right, well, I just want to get stronger. Well, wait a minute. How about we have a goal? How about we have a target? And what I would, say is there should be a chart. And if you're 50 years old, well, I'd like to be in the top 25% of either people my age or people 10 years younger than me, right? And that would be the goal. Same thing with VO2 max, same thing with your functional movement screen. How can you best put yourself in the highest percentile possible within your age group or the decade behind you? And that's a little game you play. You have to gamify it. And then you say to your coach, what kind of activities do I have to do to keep my VO2 max high or to make it get higher? What kind of activities do I have to do to improve that strength? What do I have to do to improve my range of motion, and set targets? So there's no way around. There is no simple fix. I mean, you could say, well, eat right and exercise. Okay, go ahead. how's that been working for you?
Yeah.
That's the advice that every doctor gives before they start prescribing you everything under the sun. I think that this cursory statement of eat right and exercise is ridiculous. No, I want a goal. I want to know my baseline. I want to know where I'm at right now compared to other people my age or younger, right? And being in the, like, I've always been in the top percentile. I don't want to be in the middle. I don't want to be average. Average, average people succumb to average things, and I don't want that. So I wasn't blessed to be a gifted athlete, so I have to work hard, and I love it. I enjoy it. I want to. It's gamified for me. I have a target and I shoot for it, and I let other people hold me accountable. I have to have a coach, and again, the coach doesn't tell me what to do. The coach holds me accountable.
And to set a plan. And I think we're talking about training for life here. We're not talking about training for a triathlon. It's training so you can be your stronger, your better self, that if by golly something happened, then you can deal with it because you've built the strength and the stamina to go through whatever illnesses might come along. So I think
it's not just illnesses. Now we make this mistake and we say, if you want to avoid disease, if you don't want to have illnesses, well, no. I just got back from Puerto Rico with my wife, and we got to do some hiking and climbing and things, and swimming and jumping off of boats and all those things. And these are things I want to do. Look, you and I work very hard, and we are going to have time in our life where we can travel and see the world. And that's going to happen in the marginal decades of my life as well. And I want to spend the money that I save and earn. So, and I want to spend it around the world. I want to be able to do these things. I want to thoroughly enjoy life today, not just when I'm 80, 85 years old. I want to do these things today. So, it's not a matter of just avoiding illness.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. So I think if we, want to leave people with parting thought here is to say, okay, am I metabolically flexible? And then we gave 5 things that they can do. And then people can decide, okay, what step can I take today? What's my first thing? Oh, I'm going to look in my area where I can get an in-body scan. I'm going to look in my area if I can get a VO2 test. I'm going to test my grip and see where I'm at. Start small, and then like we said, get a coach, get a trainer, get a naturopath, get a functional medicine practitioner to help you interpret those tests, so and you understand, and they can help you guide. So we're saying this to hopefully motivate you, not to scare you, and because we have to become our own health advocate. No one is going to do it for us. And like you said, you don't want to just play safe and sit back and see what happens. So what we're talking about is that there are things that you can do, and they're not as complicated as they might seem. Yes, genetic is important. Yes, all these other tests are important. But at the end of the day, it is about the stuff that you can do to, keep a lean body mass, stay stronger, and make sure that you're metabolically flexible. So, Stephen, we have to wrap up soon. Before we do that, I know you put a lot of great content on Instagram. I'm following you all the time. What's your Instagram handle for people to follow you?
All of my social media is at Dr. Stephen G. So it's DrSteven G. I don't spell it with a PH. So Dr. Stephen G, Instagram, YouTube, X, LinkedIn, all of them are Facebook. It's all at Dr. Stephen G.
So is your website, right? Dr. Stephen G.
Dr. Stephen G. It's drsteveng.com. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, guys, Dr. Stephen has great content on Instagram. He always picks good topic to discuss. So thank you so much for your time. Hopefully we've empowered people that to take control of their health even further and dig deeper to see where they're at. So thank you so much, Dr. Stephen, for your time tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Nathalie.
Awesome. So this was Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat. I am your host, Dr. Nathalie Beauchamp. And until next week, make sure that you stay healthy, focused, and motivated with the information that you've taken in. And like I mentioned, just start implementing little things here and there, and you won't believe the progress that you can do once you start adding those habits and the changes in your life. So thank you very much.
Welcome to Dr. Nathalie's 7-Day Hack Your Health Challenge. Transform your fitness level with 7 quick, do them from anywhere workouts. Look and feel great. Nutrition. Master the art of optimizing your diet and maximizing nutrient intake with daily nutrition challenges. Biohacking. Unlock exclusive content to tap into your body's innate wisdom. Take on challenges to optimize your mindset and physiology. Ready to transform your health? Visit www.drnat.life to join Dr. Nathalie's 7-Day Hack Your Health Challenge. Your journey begins now.
This has been Hack Your Health with Dr. Nat. Tune in each week and uncover simple yet powerful strategies and actionable steps to elevate your health and wellness.